we were like, we have to move fast because I know that the other players, whether it's Disney or Riot Games or whoever, they're going to end up getting on board with this eventually. And we need to move fast. And so we just went all in.
Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I'm Carly Riley, and today on the show, I am joined by the one and only Tom Bilyeu. Tom is a mega entrepreneur. He was the founder of Quest Nutrition, which he sold for, I think, $1 billion+ several years back. And he is now the co-founder of Impact Theory, which is a Web3 media and production company that is building across nonfiction content with Tom's podcast and series of web shows. It's also going heavy into fiction content, TV, film, gaming, animation, comics. I mean, what he's building is vast, and he's doing it all with Web3 top of mind, front and center, integrated into everything he's doing. So we talked about a lot in this conversation, Tom's background, which was really fun for me to learn more about. I've followed Tom for a while now, but really didn't know that he has a background deeply rooted in storytelling. So we talk about storytelling, about the role that plays with NFTs and Web3 and what he's building now. We talk about how Tom thinks NFTs and Web3 can lead to a resurgence of the middle class, which we all know is really struggling. So we get sort of philosophical on that, on the fall of institutions and what that's leading to in society, and also what the future will look like in Web3. I think Tom has a couple really awesome, very specific, concrete examples of what we have to look forward to in the next, call it several years, with NFTs and AR and VR. So that was fun to really have somebody like Tom paint a picture of the future for us, for me. And then we talk about some of the specific projects that Tom is building out with Impact Theory, with his NFT program, and what lies ahead for him and for that project. So I really think you're going to like this one. We talked for a long time. He was so generous with his time and just has so much to say, and is a wealth of information and just a joy of a human being. So very grateful for this time with Tom. I hope you enjoy it. We are going to hear a word from our sponsors, and then it'll be on to my conversation with Tom Bilyeu.
Polygon is Ethereum's largest and most vibrant scaling solution to date. With millions of monthly users and all of the biggest DeFi apps, the Polygon ecosystem has turned into a blossoming metropolis of DeFi activity. Transactions on Polygon are quick and cheap, allowing users the freedom to achieve their DeFi goals, all while being economically anchored to Ethereum. But Polygon isn't just the proof-of-stake sidechain. The Polygon team is building a suite of scaling solutions, including Polygon Hermes, Maiden, Nightfall, and Zero, all with different design choices in order to be optimized for all possible crypto use cases. If you're a developer who wants to build on the Polygon ecosystem, go to the link in the show notes to check out their fantastic documentation. And if you're a user who just wants to experience fast and cheap DeFi, you can bridge over your ETH or other tokens and start playing around with any of the thousands of applications that are available on Polygon. Axie Infinity is a game universe filled with cute, fascinating little creatures called Axies that players can collect as pets. Players aim to battle, breed, collect, raise, and build kingdoms for their Axies. There are and will be many varied gaming experiences for Axies, many of them having players compete with each other using complex strategies and tactics to attain top rankings or be rewarded with coveted resources. Others will have them complete quests, defeat bosses, and unlock in-depth storylines. There are countless unique Axies that players can collect with varying body parts and experiences. The Axie universe is a player-owned economy where the players can truly own, buy, sell, and trade the resources they earn in the game through skilled gameplay and contributions to the ecosystem. It's a digital nation where people come together globally with their Axies to play, earn, and live. Join the Axie revolution at axieinfinity.com/bankless.
Hello, GM everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I'm Carly Riley, and I am so excited today to be joined by Tom Bilyeu. He is the co-founder of Impact Theory, which is a media and production company that we are going to talk all about. They are heavily in NFTs and Web3. You have probably seen Tom talking on his own podcast or somebody else's podcast or Twitter or Instagram. He's got a sprawling empire that we're going to talk all about. And he was previously the co-founder of Quest, which we may dive into a little bit here as well. Tom, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I have seen many an episode of your show, so I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. I'm so flattered to hear that. Well, let's kick off for folks who maybe, don't have full context on you. Like, give your little bit of a background, and I'll start off with this sort of teaser line, which is you are pretty on the record about saying that you are now trying to build like kind of the next Disney, which I love, a big kind of teaser to get everyone pumped about this conversation with. So with that lead in, why don't you give us sort of your background?
Yeah, so I'll put it in a really brief nutshell, and then whatever you want to push on, we can go deeper. So I went to film school and consider myself an artist first. And I graduated from film school and thought I would get the 3-picture deal, but I didn't. And I was really quite hopeless when I graduated. I had no idea how to break into the industry. And this is the late 90s. So there's no YouTube, there's no, like cinema grade camera in your pocket. It's really crazy how far things have come. And so I really did feel lost. To jumble the timeline a little bit, but to make it easy for people to understand, I wrote a screenplay. It got turned into a feature film. I was traumatized with how it came out. I had met these 2 very successful entrepreneurs, and they were like, look, man, if you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. So why don't you come with us and get rich? And I was like, yes, that is exactly what we should do. And, we all of us thought it would take about 18 months. And so I pitched my wife, it's going to take 18 months. I know it's weird, but this is going to be amazing. We'll control the resources. It'll be great. And she was on board, and I went in, and 18 months turned into 14 years, but 15 years actually. But it did end up working. And so it was, this radical journey that I never could have predicted. It was absolutely crazy. Changed my life, changed my mindset. Really was a very difficult journey, but I'm grateful in the sense that in the beginning, I didn't have a why. And so I loved movies, I loved TV and film, and knew that I wanted to do it for the neurochemical response, but I didn't have like a grand sort of Nietzschean why, if you will, that would allow me to fight really hard. And, as Nietzsche said, a person with a strong enough why can endure almost anyhow. And I didn't have that. And so going through the business journey did lead me to that. And so at Quest, so I guess back up, when I was in college, I ended up big brothering for this little kid that grew up in South Central LA, and ended up big brothering for him for like 8.5 years. It was supposed to be 8 weeks, and became this whole like just incredible thing. And at one point, I was the guardian that helped him into the foster care system, long story why. But like that was how integrated he was in my life. Flash forward 15 years later, I've got 1,000 employees that remind me of him. And so it just gets me thinking about this idea of frame of reference and how impactful that is. So, this is something, hearing you and Andrew Yang talk about this, that really matters to me is, when you think about doing things that are anti-poverty, there's a huge frame of reference component to it. And if you grow up with a certain level of thinking that doesn't propel you to believe you can do it, then you won't even try because you're convinced that you'll fail. And so I became obsessed with the idea of right now, your zip code is the number one predictor of your future success, more than your IQ, which is terrifying to me. And so at first I thought I could attack the problem head on and just say, all right, look, I've radically changed my life through these sets of ideas. I took myself from literally scrounging my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car to building $1 billion company. And nothing special about me. It's just there's core ideas that are, it's the physics of being human, basically. And if you understand these ideas, then you can take control of your life. And so I tried to just give those in what I called Quest University. It impacted 2% of the people that encountered it, changed their life forever. I still get phone calls and stuff from those guys. It's really gratifying. But for me, it's like, well, what about the 98%? And so that led me back to storytelling and getting beyond the sort of logical centers of the brain. And so that was when, while I'm building this protein bar company, I'm like, wow, this really now has given me this why for if I can actually pull this off when I build the studio, that there'll be a real strong emotional component to why I want to do it, which is to make sure that nobody gets to the age of 15 without encountering a growth mindset at scale through story. And so that's the nutshell of how we've ended up here.
It's awesome. And I've heard you give sort of versions of that before. And it's funny because I think we have a similarity around that. I've said this story to people before publicly, I think, but I don't know, but I don't say it often, which is the reason I actually joined Andrew Yang's presidential campaign in 2018 was I was a UBI fan, and I was working on, I feel embarrassed saying it because it was terrible, but like a pilot script about a woman working at a think tank who was researching UBI, because my thinking was, can we like Trojan horse, can we mainstream the concept of UBI through entertainment and through a show that sort of like feeds it to you with sugar instead of like some academic policy thing. And that it was while I was doing that I heard Andrew on a podcast and was like, oh, this dude's also trying to mainstream UBI. I went and saw him speak in person and actually like went up and was like, by the way, I'm writing this like screenplay thing. And then of course instead abandoned that and went and worked on his campaign. But that's sort of exactly what I hear you describing. Your why now for telling stories is to kind of Trojan horse these principles you've learned and these ideas around, call it how to succeed, but not just in the professional money sense. I think it's, fulfilling life means a lot of different things. So that's sort of what I take from what you're trying to do. Is that right?
Right on the money. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. I have to ask, what was this screenplay that sold that traumatized you? Is this like a film we can all go watch and like re-traumatize you with?
Please do not. I will tell you what was the original title? No, you can look it up. It's starring Michael Madsen. It's called The Brazen Bull. I do not encourage people. Bless.
Impact Theory gang. Really, let's do it.
Yeah. Really sweet people behind it. I actually have a lot of love for the people that made it. It just didn't come out the way that I wanted it to. Yeah. So.
Again, because you didn't control the resources.
Art. You have to control the resources.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then my other quick interlude question before we dive into where we are now is, what was this 18-month get rich quick scheme? What was the plan for getting rich in 18 months? It didn't
feel like a get rich quick scheme, but it seemed possible. So this would have been 2003, where it was a tech company, and so it was security software. The guys who ended up becoming my partners, but at the time were just my employers, really had what felt like a super novel idea around security software. And so it was like, we're almost done. We're about to hit the market. It's going to be huge. And then you realize that, technology takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take. And then on top of that, getting like public adoption of something that's brand new takes a lot of time. And so it always felt like it was 18 months away. And so it was just like, I remember just telling my wife, like 18 more months. And then at like 6.5 years, I was so unhappy. And she pulled me aside and said, look, this is now damaging our marriage. You're so unhappy. This is really a problem. And so I went in and quit, or I should say tried to quit. And so then that begins to change things. And that ends up becoming a big part of why we founded Quest was, I was the first one to say, look, I'm profoundly unhappy and I need to make a change. I want to feel alive again. But when I said that to my partners, they were like, we actually feel the same. And so what could we do to keep working together? After that, we decided that we were going to sell that company and start something new based on passion, based on building community, connection. I kept saying, I just want to be myself. Now, of course, we would say I want to be authentic. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was like the big thing. I had realized that the struggle was guaranteed, but the success wasn't. And so, because we had been like, we thought this was so cool. We're like, the question everybody needs to ask themselves is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I finally realized, that's the wrong question. The right question is, what would you do and love every day, even if you were failing? Mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, failure is the most likely outcome, especially if you're trying to do something big. And so living your life where the outcome is the thing that matters, it's a super dangerous way to live. So I was like, look, whatever we do next, I know that I can't guarantee that I'll be successful, but I am going to show up every day and fight. And so the fight needs to matter. The fight itself needs to matter. And so that became my obsession, was what would be something where the three of us overlap, because they didn't necessarily have all the same feelings that I had. So it's a Venn diagram. Like, what's that thing for me where I can show up, fight for somebody that I know and love, and build a business at the same time. And so that ended up being nutrition. So we're like, cool, let's do this. And because I wanted to get back into storytelling from the jump, I was building essentially a media company inside of a protein bar company, which back in whatever, we started thinking about it in like 2008, 2009. And that was so weird. Like everybody thought we were crazy. It was like very strange to be focused on social media. It wasn't even called social media at the time. And so going really intensely on that, building out, a large media department, creating all of our own content, ended up working tremendously well because we just got the timing so right. But it was all very counterintuitive at the time.
And of course, all such precursors to everything in this space now, building community, being authentic, like making sure you're creating more value for, at that point, your audience now, what would be your like active participants almost. So
no doubt.
I'm excited to get into today and sort of that thread. I want you to break down for folks. Because now, you exited Quest, you sold Quest? Like a $1 billion exit. You're one of those folks. You finally got there. You control the art now, man.
Exactly. That's true. For better or worse, that is 100% true.
And you're now building Impact Theory, which, would you call it a media company, a production studio? What's the like, what is it?
Yeah. So I would call it a Web3 media company.
Well, okay. Amazing. This is my favorite topic of all time. So can you break down for us? I think folks maybe don't really know the scope of Impact Theory. Like it has this nonfiction arm, which is the show you do, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're building out this fiction studio, which looks vast. Just kind of break down what the kind of business is here we're talking about. We'll get into the Web3 side of it.
Yeah. So to understand the decisions that we're making as a studio in terms of the breadth, you really have to understand our goal. So our goal is all about, I'll call it mindset, but really more accurately, it's frame of reference. And so your frame of reference is formed by the things that you believe to be true about yourself and the world. And if you get your frame of reference right, it will move you towards your goals. If you get your frame of reference wrong, you'll either stand still or move away from your goals, or you won't have goals, which is honestly where most people live. And so, like I said, at first I thought you could just tell people, hey, think like this, act like this, and it will improve your life. And I realized that probably would work if they were your kids and they saw you modeling that behavior and, they wanted to emulate you and they see what you're doing with your life. And so there's a lot of emotional connective tissue there. And you would start them thinking like that when they're very young. So it would just be a part of how they view the world. But when you're hitting somebody with that when they're in their mid-20s or later, it was like a very small number of people could transcend the societal pressure that they were living under. So to give you an idea, I began honing these ideas when the employees that I was working with on a day-to-day basis all grew up in the inner cities, like hard, Carly, hard, like crazy stories. One guy held his stepfather while he bled to death from a gunshot wound to the head. Another guy hid under a car while his best friend was about 8 inches from him, trying to hold his intestines in because he'd been shot point blank in the stomach with a shotgun. Another guy, his sister was shot to death in the heart with an AK-47 in his front yard. I mean, it was just like story after story after story. And I was like, God, man, I used to tell people I grew up poor. And now I realized fundamentally, I did not grow up poor. I have seen poverty now up close. It is very different than the way that I grew up. And that was like, oh my God, like these are incredibly smart people, but they're not doing anything with their life because nobody's taught them to be optimistic about their future. Nobody has shown them that the human animal is designed to improve. And so even if you're not educated today, you can get educated. And so I was like, okay, hold on a second. I'm meeting these guys, like some of them were drug dealers, some of them former drug dealers, because I have a belief that it doesn't matter where you start. It only matters who you want to become and what you're willing to do to get there. And I used to say that all the time. And then here I am confronted with these extraordinary people that are going nowhere fast in their lives, taking huge risks as gang members or drug dealers. And I'm like, would I consider employing somebody that has felony convictions? And so I was like, well, if that thing that I say, it doesn't matter where you start, it only matters where you want to go. If that's really true, then why wouldn't I? And so we put the word out that we would consider people for employment, even if they had felony convictions, and people lined up around the building to be interviewed. It was insane.
How did you put the word out? Can I ask that, tactically speaking?
Yeah.
Like what was that? What did that look like? Like on YouTube, or where is it?
Yeah, the kid. Well, unfortunately, that didn't really exist at that point. So the kid whose sister was shot with an AK-47, he was of the streets is no better way to put it. And so we just told him, hey, if you've got friends that are like you, they're hardcore, they want to do something great with their lives, like we're growing fast, we need people, tell people, even if they have felony convictions, we'll consider them. Because that was like his first question. Was like, hey, most of the people that I know have been to prison. And so we're like, yeah, we'll do it. It's all good. And so he just started telling people. And so, it was friends, cousins, things like that in the beginning. But then ultimately we had Bloods and Crips working on the same line. It was bananas, but there was like, we weren't talking about it. That wasn't like a thing. It wasn't meant to be like a halfway house or anything. It was like, I want hardcore people. I want people that really want to go somewhere in their lives, that want to improve, that really want to do something. And so we got amazing people, but there was one guy, to give you an example. And one day I really hope that the statute of limitations ends and this guy can really tell his true story, because it's insane. But he had for sure felony convictions, but was so driven and wanted to be better, and originally took the job because he needed a front for the money he was making as a drug dealer. But he had to be able to tell his parole officer where he's getting the money from. But he ends up coming inside the company as this incredible guy. And I was like, look, you never have to lie to me. Just tell me what's up and let me see if these ideas can be useful to you. And so he told me the truth of what was going on. And, I was like, look, you need to start reading. Like, that's a big thing. So he starts reading, and he ends up getting in a fist fight with a friend in his neighborhood because they were like, oh, you've changed. Like, you've started reading these books. And I was like, this is a big part of what I'm up against, why it's 2% and not 98%, because there's so much societal pressure to stay the way that you are. And there's that great Jay-Z quote, you think I worked this hard to stay the same? And it's like, but there's all this pressure for them to stay the same. So I'm trying to come up with these ideas, like, how do I help them? And just realize that a key priority is to get these ideas to people when they're younger, before those kind of pressures take hold.
Yeah. And before you start to kind of get more set in your ways. I know your whole theory is that you can always change, and I get that, but it does get harder as you get older. It gets harder.
No doubt. I mean, there's brain science around that. I wish there wasn't. I wish that we were equally malleable at 98 as we are at 8, but the reality is we're not.
We're not. So this is where you have a podcast and a YouTube series, like a web series show called Impact Theory. And I know Lisa runs Women of Impact, and you have sort of all sorts of different programming that's on that nonfiction side that it sounds like falls in that category of you'll hit 2% of people with that, who just need to hear the lessons, and then maybe we'll go do something about it. But the majority of people,
in fact, that was
really
where
hard.
I started. So we've got this funnel, right? So if we're trying to get people down here, frame of reference, really prescriptive behavior, do this, think like this. But I know that I have to get past the intellectual centers. I have to deal with the reality of any pressures you might have grown up with. So at the top, we have entertainment. So games, movies, TV.
Okay.
Then we have the middle layer of the funnel, which is what we're known for now, which is the non-scripted content, the interview series, the things where I'm bringing on people that are just presenting ideas nakedly. There's no I won't say there's no entertainment value, but it's not like a movie or a video game. If I, I'll be honest. And then at the bottom is our university called Impact Theory University, which is literal coursework around think like this, act like this. So at the top, we introduce you to ideas, but in an entertaining fashion. And the way that I always explain that is Star Wars changed my life. And the way that Star Wars changed my life is it introduced me to Yoda, who's basically just quoting the Tao Te Ching. And then when I was 16, a friend of mine was like, hey, you should read the Tao Te Ching. I read it and I was like, oh my God, this guy Lao Tzu sounds exactly like Yoda. And so that was my connection point. And Taoism ends up changing my life quite profoundly. And so then as I get older, the dominant metaphor for my life becomes the Matrix. And then obviously I'm pursuing film as a career at that point. And so I'm just obsessed with how you can get these ideas across in that way. So we introduce them to the ideas, but then we take them deeper into that prescriptive content. So that means already that we're going to have a bifurcated strategy between fiction and nonfiction. But it bifurcates even more as you go, but rather than, give a running diatribe, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So it's like you get people in with sort of the more candy-like stuff, and it becomes more like vegetables as you move down the funnel, depending on what you like. Some people love coursework. I'm not trying to compare your coursework to vegetables. I'm just,
No, but the funny thing is we use that. We talk about that all the time. We don't want to be a company that's trying to make your vegetables taste better. What we want to be is a company that's like, we want to make compelling experiences that happen to be good for you.
Yeah. Okay. And so this, we haven't even gotten to the NFT part of the Web3 part, which we fully will. I promise to everyone, but it's something I really wanted to talk to you about is storytelling, how you source content, because that is such a part of your background. And it's something I find fascinating. So when you're building your animated series or, your comic or your games, like what is that identifying the stories you want to tell look like? And do you start with, okay, here's something that's entertaining and now let's figure out how to weave these lessons into it? Or do you start with the lessons? Like how does the greenlighting content process work for y'all?
So it always starts with the theme. And I would say, and look, it's intertwined where sometimes it'll just be, I'll have this image or an idea. Like I have this story called Coyotes of the Air Gap, which is about, it's my version of the Matrix. So I tried to get the rights to the Matrix. We can talk about that later. They rejected me. And so I thought, okay, cool. Like if I were going to create something inside of a similar framework where you're inside of a computer construct, what would that look like? And so it's about basically like a detective agency that has to bounce from server to server to solve these puzzles. And there's one overarching puzzle, which is this kid named Oliver, who is very mysterious and nobody understands why he exists on this like prison server. And so our protagonist group, basically, when they realize there's this one kid who's on a server all by himself, like, what is it about this kid? And they go and get him to try to figure out like what's going on. And so like that, the idea of crossing the air gap, if you know what an air gap is, it's where a computer's not connected to the internet. And so why would these guys think that they could ferry people across the air gap? And so I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. Okay, now I need to anchor myself around what's the theme that we're going to deal with. Well, the whole reason that I love the Matrix is because it comes down to, in a computer construct, it's really, you're no longer beholden to the laws of physics. And so it's about what you believe to be true and your ability to understand the construct well enough to manipulate it. And that's really life. And so once you understand the way the world works and how much of it is just belief systems, I'm not saying you can violate physics because you can't, but like when you have the right belief system, you get into what I call the only belief that matters, which is that you can learn something and get better. And so now, okay, we've got that theme, and now how do we build a story around it? Because that's going to influence what characters, what story arcs, what are the characters' weaknesses. So we created this thing we call the story info sheet. The story info sheet is like basically all the things that I learned in film school. So, who's the character? What is their wound, their emotional wound? What is their, as they call it, the want and the need? And so you just go through these things. So we've got the theme, you've got the log line, you've got what the character's emotional wound is, who the antagonist is, why they're the perfect kryptonite for your character based on their wound. And so once we get the story info sheet nailed, I'll greenlight that. And then we go into actual like outlining and scripting.
Wow. And so that's an example, obviously coming sort of straight from your brain. Are you also sourcing content from other places? Like, do you have, or is it mostly right now, like Tom's brain?
Well, we're open to all of it. So if there are any gifted writers out there, trust me, we want to hear from you. It's just, we exist only to tell empowering stories. And so if you have an empowering story and you're a talented writer, definitely hit your boy up because we are always hungry for writers. So right now, I'd say about 85% of what we have in the pipeline are ideas that we've developed in-house, but we do have some things that are out of house. And then we've also approached some different anime properties for the rights to their stuff. So one of the ones that we're pursuing now is proving to be very difficult, but is a story called Vagabond, which is about the samurai swordsman Musashi. And so that would be incredible. Vagabond is one of my favorite, if not my favorite manga. So yeah, there are things that like that where it's just so spot on. And The Matrix was the first thing. When it was considered a dormant franchise, we tried to get the rights to that.
How many years ago was that you tried to buy The Matrix?
That would have been 2016.
You can ignore this question and we can cut it out if you don't like it, but
I'm already going to answer it. I can just tell you that right now.
How rich do you have to be I could buy The Matrix? Or like, how much money do you have to consider buying The Matrix?
I didn't go in thinking I was going to have to buy it. That's the crazy thing. And so, and this plants the seed for what becomes my obsession with Web3. Now, keep in mind, in 2016, I had not heard Web3, nothing. I didn't know what the blockchain was, nothing. But I put this whole presentation together, and my thing was, now it's their phrase was dormant franchise. I am not making that up. That is what Warner Brothers told me to my face when I went in to pitch. So they were like, look, we consider the Matrix to be a dormant franchise, and, very interested in what you're pitching. And my whole pitch was, look, don't even let me mess with the canon characters. I won't touch Morpheus. I won't touch Neo, Trinity, none of that. Let me just boot up another server, and I'll tell stories within that framework, but let me leverage the name. This is like the most important story in my life. I love it so much. Like, I really think that I could do it. And you don't have to give me any money. I will fund the development myself entirely, which I would have been a 7-figure investment on my part to give you specific numbers. But I wasn't expecting them to say, oh, give us money just to have the conversation. I thought and I gave them like every way to quarantine me. I was like, look, I'll do it only in comics. You can have the right to disapprove if you think that I'm doing something wrong or whatever. Like, I'll run it all by you, but let me spin up this, this other server and tell these stories within it. And then I'm happy to sing for my supper. If it's good and you guys think, whoa, like these guys really know their way around story, then I would put my hat in the ring to produce a reboot of the franchise. And again, this is 2016. So this is way before anybody's talking about rebooting the franchise. And they said that they would need an obscene amount of money to even have the conversation. And I was like, So now they don't know who I am, and fair enough. Like, to them, I'm some guy off the street. But for me, it's like, I just built a $1 billion company. I, have been very successful in the world of entrepreneurship, and I'm willing to front all the capital myself and give you the ability to kill the project. And you're still not even going to let me try. And so I was like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And so I came back to the team and I said, look, mark my words, as we get this off the ground, we're going to become the easiest company in the world to get a license from. Now, you have to protect your licenses. It's not like as simple as, oh, anybody do whatever you want. But we created on the back of our NFT project, the founders keys. For the highest tier key, we have something called the right to partner, which is exactly my response to the way that exchange with the Matrix went, where I want to flip it. Instead of having to pay $500,000 to have the conversation, we want the person doing that to collect the first $500,000 free and clear without us making a dime. And that was sort of all the stuff I was thinking about before Web3 came along. And then as NFTs happened, I was like, oh my God, this is the technology that lets you do all of this.
Okay, this is a perfect segue. Let's get into the NFT component of this, because I think there's a couple layers here. There's this impact theory NFT, like the legendary, the keys, which we need to talk about. And then it sounds like there's also NFTs that you'll be issuing, or that you issue as part of content that comes out. And I think those are somewhat separate categories, though I'm sure interconnected. Is that the right framing of this?
Yep.
Okay, let's start then with the impact theory keys. Break that down for folks a little bit. You've got legendary, heroic, relentless. When did those kind of come out in the journey of impact theory, and what are they?
Okay, so when we founded the company in 2016, I said to the team, our job is to stay alive long enough, meaning to stay in business long enough to find our moment of disruption. I could not have told you that was going to be NFTs, but of course, that's what it ends up becoming. Now, a year before we founded, I actually met a guy who's still in the NFT space, and he pulled me aside and he's like, yo, you have to see this thing I call V Atoms. And I was like, oh, wow, man, this looks amazing. I was like, I remember saying to him, that's going to change my business forever. And he was like, yeah, it's the future. And then I promptly forgot about it because it just wasn't ready, right? In 2015, this would have been. So it was like, I didn't know what the blockchain was, and no one was using it in any sort of appreciable way. Now, of course, I wish I hadn't ignored it, because, oh my God, I'd be a lot farther along than I am now. But as soon as I heard in early 2020, so this would have been February or January of 2020, I heard the letters NFT put together for the first time. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, this is that V Atoms thing. I was like, this actually ended up happening. So because I had already thought through it, the second I saw it, I was like, we're in, the technology's here, it's ready. And so 72 hours later, my wife and I, who's my co-founder at Impact Theory, we'd allocated millions of dollars in development, and we're pivoting the company immediately. We are now full on in this. This is that moment of disruption that we were looking for. And the only way to take advantage of a moment of disruption is to move faster than the incumbents. So we were like, we have to move fast, because I know that the other players, whether it's Disney or Riot Games or whoever, they're going to end up getting on board with this eventually. And we need to move fast. And so we just went all in. And so that's when we started thinking, okay, we've got this company, we've got this, tri-layer approach. How do we bring everything together? Because to me, the core idea, and so this is where getting into the interview you did with Andrew, I have the chills just thinking about what this is going to mean. So let's put all this in context. And if I get too far afield, bring me back to the keys, but I think this will be more interesting for the audience. So COVID happens. I'm already wealthy. I don't have to worry. But I worry about a lot of other people for whom I fear this is going to be devastating. And I have an existential crisis by proxy. And really, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was really afraid. And I thought, oh my God, this is gonna mess people up. And I didn't have a sense of like printing money or anything like that. So I'm just thinking, we're about to get hit by a meteorite in the economy, and this is going to be devastating. And already we're getting the polarization because of the discrepancies in wealth. So I'm like, all right, I have to do something. I start trying to interview like every financial thinker that I had access to because of the show. And none of them could like bring it down to what the average person should do right now today. And so I really was like getting super uneasy about where this goes. And I start really researching Ray Dalio and his ideas around the principles for dealing with the changing world order. I have Andrew Yang on the show, and I'm just like, man, where does all this go? And the more I look at how history goes through the cycle that we're in right now, and you end up having war, revolution, bloodshed, and I'm just like, fuck, I can really feel this, and forgive me if swearing's not allowed. I can really feel this going to like a super gnarly place. And I was just like, man, what's going to be the bloodless way out of this? And then totally separate, NFTs come along. I'm getting super hyped about it. And as I learn about the technology, I start trying to predict the future, because, it was Raoul Pal who said, if you want to be a macro investor, you have to live in the future and look back at the past and say, how did we get here? And so I thought, oh, that really works in technology as well. So I was like, let me step into the future now that I understand Web3 technology, look back at the past and say, how did we get here? And so as I start to understand the tech, I'm like, wait a second, because of the ownership component of this, if legislation doesn't mess everything up, this has a chance of bringing back a thriving middle class. So I was like, oh my God, like not only does this give me the moment of disruption, but it also answers this existential dread by proxy that I've been having for and if I'm honest, it's people that I know and love, right? So I'm just thinking like, whoa, there's got to be something. And so this brings them together. So now I've got storytelling, which is just my natural passion. I've got the understanding of where the technology is going, which has me excited as a storyteller, because I'm like, this is going to be a whole new thing. And then on top of that, I've got the technology also is the only thing that I know of that when I run the thought experiment, I think this could bring back a thriving middle class. So now I'm like, amazing business opportunity, amazing creative opportunity, and amazing opportunity for the world. And so I'm like, yeah, we gotta go hard on this. So, so bringing it back to the keys. So I'm like, all right, the goal with the keys is to put 90% of the economic value, the long tail economic value, in the hands of my community. And I thought, this is going to be a psychological breaking point for most old companies. They won't be able to do that. Like they're just too wired to try to get everything up front. And so I thought, okay, this is really interesting. If we can pull this off, what I want to do is create an umbrella or a foundation, however you want to think about it, but a foundation upon which all of my future endeavors, because to me, the idea of Web3 is forever, whatever name it ends up going by, it's this idea of having ownership and a deeper level of engagement. Okay, so everything is going to be built on that. So how do we do that in a way where anybody that believes in us now and takes that bet is going to be able to get that value in an ongoing fashion forever? And so I didn't want to tie it to a single IP, because even as big as Fantasia may have been back in the day, or Steamboat Willie, I would rather have a piece of Frozen. You know what I mean? So it's like, but there's no way 80 years ago, they could have predicted that that was going to be a thing. And so I just thought, okay, can we create something that we can then have so that the key holders are able to get value on everything that we do moving forward? And so look, obviously there's caveats, there'll be things we do with partners and things like that, but on a rough basis, that everything that we do moving forward, and this is of course why we call them the keys, because they unlock everything in the future of impact theory.
It's amazing. There's so much there. Can you break down in kind of as specific terms as we can get, like, how does it do that? How do these keys give you the access to future value, to your future frozen? What does that look like in sort of tangible
as
terms?
of right now today, there's 7 categories of access, for lack of a better word. It could be free access, it could be early access, could be exclusive access, could be direct access to me, it could be partner perks, discounts. So there's all these different ways. And so if you have the legendary key, that's the easiest one to talk about. So if you have the legendary key, which is our highest tier, then every like prime drop of NFTs that we do, so like our first one was Mary Mods, then you get one of those for free. So as we do, our future drops like Avatar, which is our upcoming project, you would get things, they get all kinds of things for free there. But like every time that we do that, we have another secret project coming up, they will get a free drop from that. And so that's like, this is the stuff that we're doing in the first 12 months, right? So the keys came out like 4.5 months ago. So it's like, when I think about what we're doing in a year or 5 years or 10 years, it's like, it's crazy. So the 7 categories of access are what exists today, but we're always looking for ways to add value to our key holders.
Everyone is talking about the metaverse these days, and we're all still trying to figure out what it actually is, because everyone is looking for how to get exposure to it. That is why a metaverse index fund is so important, because in such a young market, an index can give you broad exposure to all the various players who are building out all these digital worlds that will ultimately become the metaverse. And that's why you should check out the Metaverse Index from the Index Co-op. The Metaverse Index gives you simple, easy, and safe one-click exposure to the emerging open metaverse trend. The MVI Index contains some of the biggest metaverse projects out there, including AXIE Infinity, Decentraland, Illuvium, and more. So join thousands of holders who have already trusted nearly $50 million to the MVI Index. And if you buy $500 of MVI on the Dharma app, you can receive $50 worth of ETH on the Polygon network. There's a link in the show notes for you to click so you can get started on your journey into the metaverse. Unstoppable Domains is the #1 provider of NFT domains. With domains ending in .crypto, .x, or .nft, Unstoppable Domains lets you replace your long, complex wallet address with a human-readable address. Using Unstoppable, you can verify the ownership over your NFTs, log into Web3 apps, and join tens of thousands of people using them as their Twitter usernames. With Unstoppable Domains, you can have all of your crypto addresses registered to one single domain. So it doesn't matter where crypto payments are coming from or where they're going. By registering all of your crypto addresses to your Unstoppable domain, all of that is taken care of in the back end. Better yet, with Unstoppable Domains, you don't have to worry about gas costs or renewal fees because you own it. Buy your domain and you can show it off as your new Twitter username. So you can get your name for as low as $5 at unstoppabledomains.com.
You've given an analogy in a number of other interviews. It's not even an analogy. You've painted a picture, and I think it's great. And so for folks who haven't maybe heard it, I think it's your like secret door, your like sort of secret door story of, as you talk about, you put your head into the future and then look back and said, how do we get there? I think that's a really good future vision and helps explain why somebody would want a legendary key or any of these other keys. Tell that sort of vision.
All right, so I am obsessed with this, and this will explain why we're doing codename Project Avatar. It's not the real name of the project. It's just what we tell people until we announce it. But so, like you said, I'm in the future and I'm looking back and I'm saying, okay, what's going to be possible? Knowing the fundamentals of what I know. And Carly, and maybe I'm just missing it, so forgive me if somebody else is talking about this and I just don't know. But people aren't talking about the thing that to me makes Web3 utterly captivating as a builder, as an entrepreneur, as a storyteller for sure, is that now, based on what you have in your wallet, I can customize an experience to you. So that so I started thinking about it in the real world. And so I was like, all right, guys, I know the following is going to be true. You go to a shopping mall. It's not true today, but it's going to be true. Although you could do In fact, everything I'm about to say you could do, you would just have to use your phone. But in the future, it will be with your AR glasses. You go to a mall, and I put on the mall a QR code. You look at it, your glasses detect QR code, boom, it loads an experience invisible. All of a sudden on the floor, you see like a dotted line and an arrow, and it's directing you to go somewhere. You come around the corner, and there is a mech from our story. So many stories that I do end up having mechs in them, but I did a comic book called Neon Future with Steve Aoki, and in it there's a mech. And so let's say that mech is there. You come around the corner and boom, there it is. And it's holding in its hand a quest bar, a virtual one, obviously. Only you see it. Your friend doesn't see it because he doesn't have a founder's key in his wallet. So this is tailored just to you. You go up, you grab that bar, and then you take it to a GNC or whatever and get a real quest bar in real life, right? That's gonna happen. Then we started thinking, okay, if that's the kind of thing that's gonna happen in the real world, what's gonna happen in the metaverse as we march towards that? And I don't typically use the word metaverse because I think that triggers in people something that's like 9 to 10 years away. But things that we can do right now today is you could be walking in Decentraland Sandbox or our upcoming Avatar space, and a door appears to you because let's say you have one of our PO apps, and it's targeted specifically to people that, let's say, have a legendary key and a certain PO app, and have completed a challenge in Impact Theory University, right? And so they've got all those things, which we will of course give them NFTs that are in their wallet. I detect that it's there, and a door appears that you see, but your friend is like, "What door? What are you talking about?" You're like, "No, there's a door right here. You don't see the door?" And then you open that door and you go inside, and now you can have a completely customized experience. The only people that have that, in that case, trifecta of things in their wallet, now get this customized experience. And so like when I think about hires that we have to make and things that we're going to be building, it's like these experiential people that are creating these incredible experiences. And if those experiences have emotional resonance, which is the key right now, and is one of the things that's really, I think it's the future, and I'm sure a lot of people are working on it. But right now, that's some of the energy that's missing from the part of the phase that we're in NFTs right now, which is largely a trading mechanism. It's, people are treating it like an investment vehicle. And look, that's amazing. And it's brought all the money and infrastructure and excitement and all of that. And I'm standing on the shoulders of those giants. I'm deeply grateful. I just know that if this ends up feeling like DeFi or the stock market, then it will become the stock market. It won't become, the entertainment portion that I'm interested in, that I think will bring the long-lasting emotional engagement that I want for this space. So that ability to create those kind of highly customized experiences. And then what we're trying to be really thoughtful about is, I think Web3 it's a mind virus in the best and worst way possible. And if we're not careful as an industry, we're going to see a mental health crisis, the likes of which we have never seen before, that started with Web 2. I think is being exacerbated by Web 3. It doesn't have to be that. But the way that we think about it is, if you're winning at our gamification at Impact Theory, you should be winning in real life. And so we're creating something that actually spans the real world and the virtual world. And so we're effectively creating, I should probably stop talking about this until we actually launch it, but I can't help myself.
Stop.
We're creating a CRM that allows us to intake all this interactive points, things that people tell us that matter to them, and then are able to reward them in the game that we're creating, in the game world, I should say, because it's not like a video game. It's a game world. It's an experience that's tied to, again, both the real world and the things you do in the virtual world. And so that's how we are thinking about where this all goes in the future. But the key to Web3 is, I didn't want a binary, okay, we're going to sell the keys and then we're going to go dormant for 3 to 5 years as we build out a game. I wanted something where it's like, hey, every 4 to 6 months, we're doing a major release, and we're just stacking these bricks. And everything is modular, right? So first the world is this big, and then it'll be this big, and then it'll be this big, and it'll have, this IP in the beginning, but then it has this and this and this. And so we're trying to make sure that we build this virtual hub that is intercompatible with where I think everything is going. So we're betting on Unreal Engine, just because I don't want to create the next Sandbox or Decentraland, another thing that's fragmented. I want to create something where it's there are already an insane number of creators. To give you an idea, and then I'll take a breath.
This
But
is
to give you
awesome.
an idea,
I've got like 6 questions embedded in everything you've just said. Finish your thought and I'll start rapid firing.
Once we announced to our community that we were building the avatar experience inside of Unreal Engine, they started creating things to like show what it could be, what their predictions were. And that obviously hints at what we're going to be able to do in the future, because there are so many people that know how to create these experiences. And so that brings you to the whole Web3 level of engagement. Anyway, I just get super hyphy when I think about where this is going. And look, you and I are recording this in sort of a bear market and people are not like feeling great. But if you're in the tech side and you're talking to other builders, Carly, like they're pot committed. This stuff is getting built.
Yeah.
Bear market, bull market, doesn't matter, right? We might lose more than we otherwise would if it were in a bull market, but like the number of people that are building incredible things. So yeah, it's going to be rad. But what everybody has to think about is, I hope, not this, right? We don't want isolationism. Like, how do we build on a foundation that's as open as possible? I get nothing for recommending Unreal Engine. I'm not tied to them, associated with them in any way, shape, or form. But I am a huge believer that right now, today, and this could change, but right now, today, that is the platform that makes the most sense to build on, because it's the most like, what'll happen is we'll create like this archipelago where it's like these little islands, but someone, even if I have to push on this on my own side, is going to create the TCP IP of video games. And then it's like, look, not everything will be able to port over. It's only going to be certain things that'll be able to connect because of balancing and things like that. But like, as we create these, what I call game-like experiences where I don't have to balance weapons or anything like that, you really could like create a way where, with some coordination, where people could teleport from one space to the other. So anyway, that's how we're approaching it.
A lot there. I have several questions I would like to follow up with, but I'll say, I think you and I relate to, I think, some of your sensibilities. I love the story thing. You know, I'm more of like a words, story, movie person than I am like sort of art, or even more music to some extent than like your kind of traditional art world. So like I've talked on the show, I've gotten excited by like the Julian Assange pack drop, which was like words, like, or there was an Epo Heroes drop where you could type in words and then, you know, your kind of a character would come to life out of that. So what to me is most exciting is like when I'm entering content worlds, right? When I'm going places and my favorite movies or stories are being told, like that's going to get me into Decentraland or the Sandbox more so than maybe even the gaming side to some extent. And so I love you painting this this kind of vision of where this could be, because I do think that gets lost sometimes in the day-to-day of just trading JPEGs, which is so not the bigger picture, the bigger context here. My first sort of question is, you know, how far out are we, do you think, from your follow the Mecca and get your Quest bar thing? I know you're saying technically we could do it now with an iPhone. Are you tracking really closely like AR development to understand when that's going to be
very
ready?
much so? Yeah. So that particular example you really could do today. The reason that we're not actively pursuing phone-based VR is that it feels gimmicky. People aren't going to do it consistently. So it's a fun way to show people the potential of this stuff. And it's definitely getting better. And yes, we are constantly taking meetings with AR and VR studios. And there's some really cool stuff happening, but it's still like bang for buck isn't quite there yet. And so we're focused more on a browser-based experience, which I think has more bang for the buck. But AR glasses are going to be beholden to the tech companies that are creating them. And so I'm going to guess realistically, AR is probably 4 years out from things where you're having that first beginning of the App Store feeling. So first you'll have the tech, it won't quite be there. It'll be cool. It'll be like the iPhone when it first came out, but there's no like deep App Store. Then you'll start getting the App Store, people start creating experiences. Then enough people will be developing for it. The cost will come down and then it will get interesting. And if I had to guess, and it's a guess, but if I had to guess, you're probably about 4 years away from that.
Okay, now I want to jump to the piece you said about the CRM. And again, you can stop me because I know you're like, we're not fully built out. I shouldn't be talking about this at all. But just to see if I understand this, it sounds like what you're describing is you have this massive community and you have a sort of subset of that community that are token holders, and you're building out this CRM where you can understand them better, map things like, oh, they care about this aspect of their mental health, or they have that goal for their life, or I don't know if that's exactly what you're describing, but things along those lines that you can then map back to maybe like their ETH address, for example. And now you can create gamification programs, et cetera, where you're rewarding them if they're logged into Headspace and doing a meditation, that you can reward their ETH address. Is that what you're talking about when you describe this CRM?
Yep. So if you take this to its natural conclusion, so we're already setting up meetings with like wearables companies and things like that, so we can pull data, so we can see like, hey, are you doing your meditation? You told us that matters to you, right? You set a goal. And so now we can see, are you actually living up to that? And if you are, then we can give you experience points that then level you up inside of the avatar experience, which then get you access to, NFTs for free. So let's say that at level 5, you get a free NFT. So it's things like that. But that's I think a much sort of farther in the future. That's going to take years to develop, to convince the companies to open APIs and things like that. But the stuff that's going to happen near term, I think, is even more exciting. And I will not reveal what we're doing, but I will say that people show affinity for certain things. An easy way to say it would be, all right, so I'm a holder of Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? So let's say, all right, you're a Bored Ape Yacht Club holder, boom, we detect that. And now you can access Bored Ape Land inside of the avatar project, but nobody else can. Or there's a specific mini challenge for Bored Ape holders that we can do. And so being able to, and we have far more sophisticated and interesting things planned. I'm just not going to reveal them yet. But if you show me through your wallet that you have an affinity for something, then I can build an experience for that. And so we are partnering with some cool entities. It will take time, but we're partnering with some cool things that we'll be building some neat experiences around. So
tell folks what the Avatar project is. You've mentioned it a couple of times. I know it's big in terms of what you have upcoming.
Yeah, so originally it started as, we knew that the keys weren't a cool PFP picture. And so part of the roadmap was, we're going to give you an avatar for your key. And then the more I learned about the technology, the more I started thinking about what we needed to do as a company to bring that vision into a modularized stair-step function that would take us to being able to create a AAA game 7 years from now, but didn't require me to raise $250 million to try and build out a AAA game now. And as I started thinking about, the Avatar project was the perfect way into that, because, one of the cool things about the moment in time that we're in is that we're all going to be able to reinvent ourselves as we step into the digital world. And look, NFT people already know that, but NFT people are the world's smallest subset of humanity. And as we think about, expanding this and inviting more Web2 people to the Web3 party, it's when I was in high school, I wanted to be a stand-up comic. When I got to college, I was like, I'm in a new city. I don't know anybody. I don't have to keep making fun of myself. I can be whoever I want. And who do I want to be? And that moment was so profound. And that's what the virtual world gives people a chance to do. Peter Diamandis, who I'm sure some of your audience will have heard of, but not everybody, really extraordinary guy, built a company called X Prize, and has been instrumental in like helping launch the space flight industry, just really, really an extraordinary thinker. And he said, the way that the internet has functioned, we have unintentionally created this like permanent record that when you were, 50 years ago, if things just went south for you in one city, you could move to another city and have a clean slate. And so the virtual world in many ways gives us that opportunity to try on different identities, to just be playful, and to have that Ready Player One moment where you can create a space that you decorate in whatever way you want with things that you have an affinity for, to show up however you want, looking like yourself, looking like your aspirational self, looking like a dragon, whatever. Like, that moment is so cool. And so Avatar is meant to give people that ability to come in and to build yourself piece by piece into whoever you want to be, and to have this really fun game-like level up mechanic where you can level up based on things you do in the real world, based on things you're doing in the in-game world. And by doing that, hopefully gamify important things in your life, as well as purely entertaining things.
Oh, that's cool. It even just the idea of like a forcing function to kind of pause in your life for a second and take that moment to say, like, am I the person I want to be? Are there what are the aspects of me that I would like to maybe work on? Like, most of us just move through the world not in any way actively thinking about the person we are becoming, because we are still becoming somebody at every moment, even once you're an adult. Like, this becomes this really interesting way to reflect on that in real life as you're reflecting on who you're going to become in the digital world. That hit me.
No doubt. And if we can make this as fun as we think we can, it's a game. Like, you're playing, you're having a good time. And, again, going back to that idea, our goal isn't to make your vegetables taste better or to hide them in food. Our goal is to make something that's truly entertaining, that many people will engage with it just for the entertainment factor. And, oh, by the way, it happens to be good for you. It's introducing these, empowering ideas. And so the lore of the world is that it's you versus you. And you are both the antagonist and the protagonist. And so, and I mean, such is real life. And so if we can make that fun, then I think we've got something really special. And then, like I said, this is all modularized. So it just builds out, and we've got these, very expansive plans, but we have ways to make it a stair-step thing. So we're, not going dormant for 2 years while we build something out.
Very cool. Okay. So that gives, I think, a little bit of a picture and even more context into the key side of impact theory, and then it just gets you the access to this whole ecosystem, and that's being built. You said legendary; all these key holders have a certain amount of access now to this avatar program. On the other side, so you did something like Merry Mods, for example, was your first piece of programming, I think, that really came out, and there was a whole NFT collection around Merry Mods. I'll ask you about kind of Merry Mods. But my first question, which is maybe a weird way to start out, but I heard you in another interview, you obviously love The Matrix. You talked about how, like, very early moment, you're in the theater at The Matrix and there's like this crazy cool moment in the beginning of the movie. And like, if you could have, you would have like left the theater and like gone and bought that moment as an NFT. And it got me thinking my moment would be in Legally Blonde, Elle Woods, as whatever. She walks away, she's like, I'll show you how valuable Elle Woods could be. And that would be the moment in cinema that I would buy, is like that Elle Woods moment. And it was getting me thinking, you have sports cards, right? You have these collectibles around sports, but there's never been like, I guess you have action figures, but like, you don't have like collectible moments in the same way exactly around film. Why not? And does that now change with NFTs for some reason, where we now want to have these collectible moments?
If it doesn't, I will be horrified. But in the early days of me seeing the NFT thing and being able to quickly see where this goes, I have connections to some very successful people in Hollywood, and I got them on a call and I said, look, I hope you guys do this because you're the right people to do it, because you have access to a lot more people than I do. But if you don't, trust me, someone is going to. You need to build moments for all of and of course I was like, look at NBA Top Shot, look at how they're doing this, and build these moments. And if there are, I don't know, 25 moments in cinema history that are so indelibly a part of like who I am, that I would desperately want to collect those.
Yeah. And
so I think it is an inevitability that companies will begin doing this. It will take some organization. Now, the industry that I pursued most aggressively is the anime industry. So I've anybody that's followed me for any length of time understands my obsession with anime, and they're going to do it, but there's so much coordination with who owns the rights, and like, do you have to get actors' permission? And you've got oh God, what's it called when somebody's deceased, their
estate,
whatever the name is, their estate. Thank you. Yes. So we have to go and like convince the estate to let you do it. So I don't know how many rights issues there's going to be. Yeah. And that could be the thing that ends up tanking this as an idea, because the anime industry is being very cautious and very slow for that reason. But it just seems self-evident that this will, even the most diehard opponents to NFTs 10 years from now will take it as self-evident that they need an NFT strategy. It's one of those things we have to go through this very awkward time right now. But yeah, on the other side, it is a guarantee.
How would you rank, or do you have thoughts on how some of these legacy institutions are doing? I know you saw this moment of disruption and we're like, this is, this is when we can beat the Disneys in some capacity, right? How would you say you think the Disneys, the WBs, the Warner Brothers, whatever, are doing right now?
Yeah, like Disney, I wish they were doing worse. Like they're actually moving pretty intelligently behind the scenes. I'm like, guys, come on. No, I'm actually impressed. And so, they got a lot of criticism for what they did with Vivi, because people were like, oh, they could have done it better. They needed to try something.
Yeah.
And so, I'm very impressed that they moved as early as they did. I'm very impressed that they're making hires, for the metaverse. I think the head of the metaverse or something is the title that they are looking for.
Yeah, Mike White, I think was his name. They just hired.
Oh, I didn't know that they had made the hire. So
they're definitely made a hire, and I'll give you something else, because John Rogers, who I've had on the podcast, worked at Disney for many, many years at a pretty senior level, and he always keeps me abreast on sort of his analysis of what's going on. So I think it was a guy named Mike White they hired as this like head of metaverse hire, who reports into basically their head of content distribution. So John's analysis was like, they're putting somebody really senior on this who is sitting sort of across everything. So they're taking it quite seriously. Disney, I think maybe even more so than any of the other companies, but leading the way on that.
So I think that they will adopt it faster than we think. It's gaming is where the real failure is happening. And so there it's like a civil war. So you can see the companies want to do it, but the player base is really protective. And I actually understand where they're coming from, but I think what I would love to see is, instead of their stance being don't do it, being, hey, this is amazing, we get to own it, but we want to do it in a way that's protective of mental health, that's protective of the game experience, so that this doesn't just become, something where it's about grinding to own the NFTs, you can sell like, I get why they want to make sure that the game is fun in and of itself. But I would love to see, and it will happen, but I would love to see that leadership voice start to come out, instead of right now where it's just like, if you do this, like, we're going to burn this place to the ground. And so that, I don't think, acknowledges that owning something is better than not. But they're making the assumption that the only way to own is to destroy the integrity of the game experience. And I don't think that that's true. I think it could. I think that people could do it poorly. I don't think they have to.
I know one, I guess, again, through John, my mole to all these companies, who's big into gaming, have made some really senior metaverse hires, and they just aren't, can't publicly say it. I don't even think it's on the person's LinkedIn. Like, they just have to stealth mode do this because they're so afraid of the backlash that's coming, but they are, I think in private building this stuff. What do you think are where do you see your advantages lying? I understand you're like, Disney's moving faster than we want, but you were like, moment of disruption. This is our moment. What are the advantages you feel like you all have?
Well, one, we, from a Web2 company, we already had a big following. And so transitioning from audience to community, that's like a big thing for us. And so we're going really hard. One, that for us internally to learn the different rhythms, because they are very different. That's a big win. So we came into this, 8 million strong. And so being able to launch an NFT project, being able to get people to pay attention to what we're doing, that's hugely important to us. Not having the sort of drag of like a gaming company where they have to first fight the civil war and then be able to move forward. We can do everything out in the open, plant our flag, be a voice in the space. That's been hugely helpful. And then we're totally committed. So we're not a Web2 company doing Web3 things on the side. We are a former Web2 company that pivoted entirely to Web3. And so I think that gives us a lot more momentum. And because of that, we've been able to hire away from some of these big companies, some pretty key players from some very large companies. And so we'll be making some more announcements around some of our key hires here shortly. But yeah, that's been really helpful. And then honestly, the thing that I think that we have going for us the most is today more and more people are waking up to, they want to work for a company that has a mission. And the fact that we only make empowering content is how we've been able to get just obscenely talented people that we have no right to have. We literally hired a guy and I said to him, I know that were it not for what we stand for, I would never be able to hire you. So I am extremely grateful because these are, we're now able to be the employer of choice for people that could work anywhere. Wow. And anybody that's been an entrepreneur for, any amount of time comes to one immutable truth, and you are only as good as your team. And if you can't attract high caliber talent, you're dead in the water.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean? And maybe like it's helpful to explain this in like terms of how it lives in the org charter, like this distinction between we're not just a Web 2 company that's starting to integrate some Web 3, but like we're all Web 3. We've fully moved from Web 2 to a Web 3 company. Like, what does that mean in terms of like the way meetings are run? Like, like with the conversations, help spell that out.
Yeah. So the best and worst thing about running a company is people. So they are the only thing you have, and they're all individual people with individual hopes and dreams pulling in slightly different directions. And so aligning everybody is very, very difficult. And so if you are a Web 2 company, but you believe in this Web 3 thing and you're kind of pushing on both, it's like you will end up getting a divided company versus getting everybody together and saying, hey, I want to walk you through my vision for the future. I want to walk you through why I think this is important. You talk about things like bringing back a thriving middle class. You talk about why this is the best way to achieve the mission of the company, which people came on board for that. And if it's real and that's actually true, and that's why you're doing it, everybody can see it in the movement and the motion and the way things are working. That's like, whoa, we're really able to do something we weren't able to do before. Now you get buy-in. When you get buy-in, you get momentum. And so that's really the important thing for Lisa and I was we needed to get everyone in the company to understand what this is, why it matters, and then how to do it well. And if it was part of the company, because it's crazy, like we only have 46 employees. And so it's like, even at 46 employees, like you already feel like you got to like keep everybody focused, bring everybody back, get them laser targeted on what we're doing. And so as you get bigger and you've got, Jesus, what does Disney have? Hundreds of thousands of employees. Yeah. And so when you have 17 of them working on Web3, it's like, it just gets bogged down, right? So they're making the right moves to make it important, but they have layers of bureaucracy to deal with that we don't. And so, getting everybody on the same page is critically important. And you can look at like how Microsoft had a hard time with the internet and then mobile. It's like just getting your whole company to have a divided focus is tough. You need to get everybody pointed in the same direction.
How do you think about distribution? This is something I'm always fascinated with content and NFTs. Disney obviously was a content creators that got so big, they own the distribution and now they can have Disney Plus. What does that look like for you? Do you think about, you have a web series on YouTube? Are you trying to get things on Netflix? Like, does NFTs Web3 change that? Are we all just going to watch in the metaverse? How have you thought about the distribution piece of your business?
Yeah, so this will change over time, but right now, so Mary Mods, for instance, we are pitching that to traditional Hollywood. And if we could end up on Netflix, I would be a very happy camper. So that is, us acknowledging. So I always tell people, don't deal with the world the way you wish it were, deal with the world the way it actually is. And as of right now today, being on Netflix or Disney Plus, I mean, that's, you're going to get 100,000 more times more eyeballs than you would get if you were just doing it yourself. So I think that NFTs are a key part of the launch strategy. They're a key part of how you get that groundswell of attention and promotion. But ultimately, we're trying to go mainstream. And right now, today, mainstream is Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Amazon. Like those are the, your big players. And so that's ultimately where we want to be right now today. Now, do we see that changing in the future? It certainly could. So we'll be watching very closely. If somebody launches like a decentralized version of a Netflix, although I actually have mixed feelings about decentralization, which may get this episode burned to the ground in the comments.
I do too. I've said that a little bit. So hopefully my audience, they haven't burned me yet. So
nice. So yeah, I think that some projects will benefit from decentralization and amazing things will be born of that. But I don't think every project will be decentralized. And I don't think that they will benefit if they could. I think some projects just will make more sense with a centralized thing. Like when I think of you won't be able to decentralize Apple. Like that just, whew, that's tough.
Yeah.
So, but there are things like Wikipedia, which are just these incredible juggernauts. So you will get things like that require decentralization, certainly are made better by it. But some things won't be. And I think storytelling is one that does not benefit from decentralization.
Yeah, I agree. I talk about this and I ask a lot of people about it, about how they think about balancing centralization and decentralization. Poopy, the co-founder of Doodles, and I talked about it a bunch because he like went into that being like, I'm going to be totally decentralized. And then was like, oh, well, the reality is like, we need a certain level of creative vision here. And they, you know, and they've done a good job of, they have a doodle bank. Like they involve the community as much as they can. But I think
yeah, there's incredible ways, even when you're not decentralized, there are incredible ways. Like we're building out tools. We're even working on a school to help people in our community learn to create within Unreal Engine. But at the end of the day, like you said, there needs to be creative vision. You need to create something cohesive. There will be elements of the story that we would love for people to create fan fiction or to create, like if a fan fiction author gets upvoted enough by our community, we could give them a branch of something like go do your thing.
Oh, this was a question I was going to ask. I'm glad you just said that. Have you heard of Storyverse?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is a connection that I'm going to make. Justin Waldron, who founded Zynga back when he was 19, and of course, Mafia Wars and the whole thing, he's working on a Web3. They've launched now. I mean, they're launching in stages, I think, but basically that where they're building, I think, with Unity, right? And it's a game, they've got a game engine underpinning it so that members of communities can upload their NFT characters, create stories with them using this sort of very friendly game engine thing. Then he's partnering with the projects so that the rest of the community can upvote certain stories. And it's like, okay, you guys are going to talk because you've talked about canon and having the community vote about what gets to be canon. And this is literally, he's trying to build the tooling exactly for that.
I love that.
So yeah, he's very cool and obviously a good person to bet on in general in life. He's super, super sharp. So this thread of, and it ties into this decentralization because there's also a difference between decentralization and a certain level of like distribution of benefits and gains, right? Like you can be a sort of, you can be sort of centralized and be the core creative leader and visionary for impact theory, but try and distribute the benefits of impact theory, which is what you're doing with your key program and your NFT program. And is that where you see this resurgence in the middle class could potentially come in now if you're somebody who's passionate about tattoos and you can buy NFTs for your favorite tattoo artists that are worth something in the future? That's not something that's something you as an individual could probably do better than Goldman Sachs. Like, is that, if you're a big believer in Tom Bilyeu and the stories you're telling and you have these community members, they can now reap the benefits and the value you can create for them. Is that the story you see playing out for this middle class resurgence?
Yeah, so I'll tell two examples of how I think this can play out. So you've got something like the keys, right? Where you buy the keys and I'm over here, pouring blood, sweat, tears, and capital into making sure that those things get value. You have to be so careful with the words you use because I cannot guarantee that they will go up in value, but that we're delivering value over time. And you're going to get a lot of people doing that because it aligns the selfish desires of the company and the community. And that's what you want, right? You want to be in a position where the more selfish we are as a company, the better it is for them. And the more selfish they are as a community, the better it is for us. And so we're truly aligned. And that gives people the ability to go out and say, oh man, I love what they're building here. I love this story. I love this artist, whatever. You get a piece of that. And now as they build their career, you own something that hopefully the value reflects their ongoing increase in value as an entity, as a person, as an artist. So that alone is going to be huge. Then you've got something like a musician where, let's say that I can't make music, but I know good music when I see it. And the example I always say is when I was a kid, I was growing up like an hour away from a town called Aberdeen, Washington. Now, there was a little band born out of Aberdeen, Washington called Nirvana. And had I found them when they were a small band in Aberdeen, Washington, and they had an NFT project and I could bet on them. And then my thing is I'm a maven, I'm an influencer, right? So people pay attention to me because I have good musical taste. I can't make the music, but I can help build the awareness and attention around this band. And so now, because I have one of their NFTs, as I push and promote and get people to pay attention, whether I have a show on Spotify or a show on YouTube, and I just talk about who's that next hot upcoming artist, just as a random person, but I can go find them, get their NFT and be like, yo, I'm a tastemaker. These guys are incredible. Now I'm putting them on and I help the band. And because of that ownership, I also help myself. And you're going to get like all these niche audiences. And I think niche is the future. We're working on a project called Renders, which is anime focused. It's an anime focused NFT marketplace that is on layer 2 so that we can actually make things accessible. Because right now it's like everything's expensive. And when I'm looking at NFT art, like, yo, I don't know if I can afford that. That's where I know there are a lot of people out there like, whoa, I really like this artist. Yeah. Like, so I have this whole diatribe on what happened to the Western comic market. Super thumbnail sketch. The Western comic market, there is a single title in Japan called Demon Slayer that outsells the entire Western comic market combined. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, X-Men, Iron Man, all of it, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the whole thing, all put together is outsold by a single Japanese title. Now, there's a whole host of reasons that happened, but one of them is that the Western comic market stopped aiming at kids. Whoops. So now you don't have any new people coming into the ecosystem. And so I'm like, kids cannot afford a $1,500 drop, right? So I'm like, somebody needs to make some of this accessible. And so like focusing on that, making things more accessible so that more people can get in this stuff.
So making it more accessible so more people can get into this stuff. I'm sure we have the local recording of whatever you just said, but that was sort of the thrust, was like, how do you target kids with comics and the rest of it? Okay. We're almost at time here. So I think building off of this is sort of, maybe I'd love to hear your kind of closing philosophize and call it, still in this thread of like different versions of decentralization that can exist. And in this theme of sort of going into these very niche communities, I'm fascinated by these sort of macro dynamics at play in like the fall of institutions and the rise of the individuals. And I've heard you sort of mention this or allude to this in the past. And I think about it all the time. And now the world thinks about it all the time, I think. But I've been thinking about it for a while, which is like your Joe Rogans. And people now realize how big his audience was. But I think like 3 years ago, I was listening to people like Sam Harris, and people had no idea how big I think his audience was relative to CNN. But there's still this dynamic, and this sounds like I'm saying it's a bad thing, and I don't know that it necessarily is, right? Where so you've got this fall of institutions, but you also they still have the credibility. If you go on Wikipedia and at the bottom the source is CNN, you're going to trust that in a way that if it says the source is like the Joe Rogan podcast, even if you love Joe Rogan, like that doesn't feel like that has the same credibility. Do you have any broad philosophical thoughts about this? I mean, it's true for you too, right? You have this huge audience. You get, way more people watch you than watch cable TV, about where the end of this sort of plays out. Again, not a hard question here, more like a general philosophical. Would love to get your thoughts on this sort of fall of institutions, rise of individual creators, and where that kind of ends in all this.
Okay, so that to me is a very big and somewhat scary. It has scary implications. I think that the rise of the individual in the abstract is like the greatest thing of all time. And I have obviously benefited profoundly from this. I worry though, that what we're witnessing is a deep fragmentation that leads to division, that in the late part of the macro debt cycles, as Ray Dalio talks about them, we're in stage 5. And so anybody that's read Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, Ray Dalio outlines that civilizations go in these 6 phase things, and they constantly rotate through. And phase 6 is essentially bloody implosion, right?
And we're in 5.
We're
6 is
in
bloody
5,
implosion.
And not only are we in 5, are we mid 5? Because we're not beginning of 5. Yeah. We're either mid or late 5 because of all the like money printing and the populist rise of populism in the US. And the growing tensions between the US and China. And as you and I are recording this, there's a war going on between Russia and the Ukraine, which some people think is giving cover to China to consider an invasion of Taiwan, certainly to test the waters to see how the West and the US react. And so it's like, there's real implications to being divided. And so even though I really believe in the rise of the individual, and I am in no way, shape, or form interested in going back to, the organizations, I really, really, really think a lot about how do we bring people together? How do we find a way to connect? How do we find a way not to get isolated into our bubbles? Like the first time I encountered the ferocity of the gaming community's hatred of NFTs, I was like, whoa, like I didn't even know it was happening. Yeah. Like everyone I listened to was like, NFTs, baby, NFTs, we're going to change the world. Like, this is amazing. And then I was kicked in the face by what was happening in gaming. And I was like, whoa, I did not see it coming. And so I was like, man, like I really try not to get into a bubble. And yet here I am having no idea that this is like just despised by the gaming community. So anyway, look, as we get these deeper and deeper like fragmentations, because even I have a fairly robust social following, but it represents like this really narrow band of humanity that happens to respond to my style, right? And so when you get, I mean, how many people are there? There's so many people now that have millions of followers. It's crazy. So anyway, I think that it is incumbent upon all of us to look for ways to come together, to reconnect, to feel love for each other. I don't think it is beyond our ability to do that, but I do not think it will happen by accident. And so I think people need to be very, very, very thoughtful that the same algorithms and loosening of the institutional grips that have brought us to this amazing place can also create some pathological outcomes. And we need to be super thoughtful about how we move forward.
I need to catch up on the Ray Dalio stuff.
Oh yeah. The book is so intense, Carly. For a long time, I couldn't read it in the mornings. It just set my day off on such a super stressful place.
I had the reverse with Andrew Yang's book. The reason I joined his campaign after I heard him, whatever, on a podcast, and Sam Harris's podcast, whatever, and then got his book. And I did the reverse, which is if I would read it at night, I would get so worked up I couldn't fall asleep. So I could only read it in the morning. That was the War on Normal People, which also is a little doomsday and spells out, I think, kind of similar, decay of things that end poorly. Okay, well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, things we didn't get to touch on about impact theory, the NFT programs. You've got 10 trillion things going on and coming up. So we'll have to have you back on at some point to give us the update. But
I would do it in a heartbeat. But no, man, this was wonderful. Nothing else that I need to say.
Cool. Well, thank you then. We'll close this out. And if this was a chaotic recording in the beginning to everyone, we had to switch recording platforms here. It's been a little bit of we're talking about the metaverse while we can't get like Zoom to work. So but it was a total pleasure, Tom. Thanks a lot.
It was awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, head over to Bankless HQ right now to develop your crypto investing skills and learn how to free yourself from banks and gain your financial independence. We recommend joining our daily newsletter, podcast, and community as a Bankless Premium subscriber to get the most out of your Bankless experience. You'll get access to our market analysis, our alpha leaks, and exclusive content, and even the Bankless token for airdrops, raffles, and unlocks. If you're interested in crypto, the Bankless community is where you want to be. Click the link in the description to become a Bankless Premium subscriber today. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for in-depth interviews with industry leaders, Ask Me Anythings, and weekly roll-ups where we summarize the week in crypto and other fantastic content. Thanks everyone for watching and being on the journey as we build out the Bankless Nation.